Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another narrator interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us is a narrator making their official debut here on the show. Now, my guest today is a vocalist and recording artist who has performed on countless stages over the past 2 decades. Her voice has captivated concert-goers with its blend of warmth and dramatic angst. She aims to bring that same energy into her narration. As an avid reader since childhood, she loves getting lost in a good story and using her voice to pull the characters off the page and out into the real world. She is the goth rock mom of an awesome daughter who's obsessed with reading fantasy, romance, and sci fi, and also cuddling her very well fed cat. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to our guest today, Lauren Hilary, otherwise known as Lauren Voss. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Awesome, Lauren. I'm so excited to have you here on the Wandering Scribe podcast. Now, before we begin, as a little icebreaker question, is there a random fact that not a lot of people may know about you?
Uh, about me. Well, let me think. Well, as you know, for people that know me as Lauren Hilary, haven't really discussed the fact that I'm in bands and do a lot of that. I can't really think of anything else. I mean, I have yeah, I've just been doing a lot of music, and I usually keep that like away from my professional persona because that's just something that like I do for fun, and I've started. Yeah, I
Okay.
it's part of, like, I think it's become more relevant now because now that I'm using my voice more for work, um, I've started talking about it more, but no, I don't really mention it, so far in any of my
Ooh.
online platform that I'm in a band. We're called Arms and Armor. We're goth and doomy and noisy and weird.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Now, for people who may not know about you as a narrator, what are some of the genres that you prefer to work under?
Um, I've been doing a lot of work in dark romance. That's a genre I love, and I'd love to keep doing it. I also work in fantasy. I'd like to do a lot more fantasy, but excuse me, I've gotten a few titles on that so far, and you know, anything paranormal. I like dystopian. I like a little sci-fi. So, so far, I've been lucky to do a little bit of work in all of those genres.
Nice. Very, very nice. And we can probably talk about this a little bit later, but have there been any projects that have come out recently that has your voice attached to it?
Um, so I just released a fantasy. Why choose? Called Crown of the Mist. The first book just came out, and
Ooh.
I'm currently recording the second book. It's by Zora Stone. Yeah, Zora Stone. And prior to that, we released me and a co-narrator of mine that I work with an awful lot, particularly in dark romance. Released it was a Christmas story, a monster romance called Chains and Candy Canes. And that was a lot of fun. So those are the most recent books that have come out.
Ooh, nice. Very, very nice. So, before we dive into more sort of like the project and behind the scenes of your day-to-day life as a narrator, Lauren, let's talk a little bit about the lead up to that. So, from your bio, you have been involved with music and concerts for a long time before you dabbled in narration and made a brand of it. I'm very curious, what was sort of like the aha moment that got you into music, as well as what pushed you into the realm of narration?
Wow. So I've been doing music forever. I mean, I was just a quiet, like nerdy kid growing up. Um, Very introverted, and I didn't go out a lot. So I spent a lot of time just learning how to play guitar and writing music and stuff while, when I was like 14, 15, whatever. And it just became part of what I do. And I've always done it. Um, for narration, So I have a professional background in like video production and doing a
Ooh,
lot of
okay.
like, you know, I've been on small film sets. I did like work for television news stations, and it's great, and I loved it, but it was hard to find consistent work. I was always like part time or temporary, or it also requires you to be like on set for long hours. Like there's a lot involved, and I did that for a long time, off and on with like also supplementing my income with an IT job working through. It was like an audiovisual IT job working through a local art college, which happens to be the same college I went to. I went to the Fine Art Institute of in Cleveland. So I worked there too for a long time. But a little bit before COVID, I had my daughter, and then COVID hit, and a lot in the video production world changed.
Mm,
It was starting to go that direction prior to COVID. Like it was more and more jobs were like, we need you to be a graphic designer and a social media manager and all this other stuff on top of a video production person. And that's not really my wheelhouse. That's not what I spent my life, you know, studying and working
mm,
in. So I had been thinking about working for myself anyway, but finding that like it was never really something I felt like I excelled at. And a lot of people do it.
mm,
And after COVID hit and we just finding out the demands of what it's gonna be like to be a parent and just how our family dynamic works and everything, it really I need to be at home more, and there aren't a lot of work from home remote, opportunities that I've seen in that field that I really want to do, that I actually have the right skill sets for, or that I just, am competitive in. And I had been thinking about shifting and pivoting anyway, so, like, having worked in production, I've worked with voiceover, artists and actors, and I had a lot of friends who were actors, and I've even taken improv classes because I wanted to know what it was like to work with actors. And I just started thinking about voiceover. I mean, I think it was my aha moment. I was like probably lying in bed, not able to sleep, listening to another audiobook because I think like a lot of first time moms going right into COVID, we spent a lot of time listening to audiobooks or reading because you couldn't really do much else.
mm.
Um, and I just remember like middle of the night being like, wait, I read ridiculously. I read all the time. I'm a vocalist. I know I can do things with my voice. Why am I not doing this? Like, it just made a lot of sense, and I think, in that moment, I gave myself permission to walk away from, like, the video production history that I have and everything I've done. I can still use a lot of those skills as, a narrator. I already know how to edit, put together, like, an audiobook, like, I knew all the technical stuff. I know how to record. I also own a recording studio that we record bands and other things, and I had my video, like, studio in there. Um It just sort of, like, clicked, and I've been putting all my energy into doing that since then.
Nice. Very, very nice, Lauren. So now that you go a little bit more behind the scenes, so can you walk us through, what you initially learned about being a narrator in terms of, getting your setup started, the types of mics you bought to, create your sound booth, and looking back on it, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of, the initial setup, those early moments of, finding your footing in the world of voice acting and narration?
Gosh. I'm just gonna preface this by saying I'm not sure if there's anything I would have necessarily done differently because, you don't know what you don't know, and I wouldn't have gotten to this point if I didn't do the things I did, you know?
That's true.
But, so again, so I as a recording artist and, my one business, I have a business partner who's also my bandmate. I've known him forever, and he's a sound engineer guy, so I already had access to, like, a lot of different types of mics. I had my own, experience working in video production with, like, recording sound and all that. So, for me, I started out with wanting to use a dynamic mic because it focuses the sound and doesn't pick up a lot of external sounds until I could get, like, a better, um, treated area, so
Right.
soundproofing and all that. So I started out with it was like a broadcast mic, the EV Electro Voice RE20, and I used that for a long time until recently, when I finally got my first this mic here is not a dynamic mic. It's a compressor mic, I believe. It's the SE 4100, and I know another engineer who's obsessed with microphones, and this was his recommendation for me, and so far it's working really well. I run that through my SSL2 Studio Logic interface, which I just bought prior to this. Sorry, Solid State Logic, not Studio Logic. I just think it picks up a little bit warmer tones. My home studio was like, I just always felt like I sounded really tinny, didn't really like it as much. Through my studio that I own, my recording studio, we have like a makeshift box. Still recording with an EV RE20 there. We just got a warm audio mic that I really like. I might try using that. But we have it's like in an industrial area. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, Ohio is very industrial. Everything's a warehouse. And there was like a workshop that moved into the building, and like there's just this tone that it's like always going, that we're working on making like a better soundproof space, because it's starting to get into the sounds. So I've been recording from home a lot.
Okay.
But so it's like constant challenges. We're always upgrading and trying to figure out like how to work around these things. So
Absolutely.
that's the technical stuff. But I think for me, like what to develop as a narrator, and for me it was more like, I've taken some improv classes and I've worked with actors. I've never really focused on that myself. But I am a performer. I perform on stage all the time, and that's taking on a persona. So I think the biggest step for me for getting into this, I found like mentoring groups. Just like when I first started, wanted to know the business, or like, how do you get into doing audiobooks? Like, what's the first, what are the steps I should be taking? I came across Angela Olfest has like voice. She calls herself Voiceover Angela. Like, if you look up how to make an audiobook, she's one of the first places that are going to pop up, because
Okay.
she's done, especially with ACX and all of that. And she offered mentoring through her website, and she also had something she called the Platinum Group, which it's basically no more. She has merged with another company called Voiceover Journey, and now she offers like a launchpad, like beginner offering through their thing. But prior to that, she did like just sort of like an open group, and we would get together every Thursdays. We still do, under Launchpad, and just read scripts together and discuss like the best way to approach it, different ways to approach it. She would give us a lot of guidance. We would do long form narration workshops, other types of voiceover. Like if you went into character development, we do a whole like night on just developing character voices. So that to me was like the biggest thing. Being in like that kind of group where I was like, I'm getting constant like coaching from all these different people, and narrators that are at different levels, and they're working narrators. A lot of them are new, and I get the opportunity then to help them, which is nice, kind of pass it along. But we just keep each other like tapped in. It also has created this amazing network of like narrators that I now know, who have gotten me jobs, and I've, vice versa. And yeah.
Nice. And that kind of leads into our next question, which is, as you mentioned, being these workshop classes, learning new skills and developing, the talent of a narrator. I'm very curious. Now, as a singer and leader of a band, I imagine you've done vocal exercises, to get your voice ready for going on concerts and for performances. And I'm very curious, did that ever translate over into narration, where you have like a ritual or routine that gets you in the zone, so to speak, before you go into your recording booth?
Yes and no. So it absolutely translates. Now, for me, I'm a bad student, and like I was like my ritual for getting ready for a show was to go and do a couple shots. So like, I wasn't always good to my voice. I think it actually hasn't gone the other way, where getting into voiceover and starting to take that more seriously has really informed my ability to perform on stage as a vocalist. Because I'm kind of a self-taught musician. It's something that I just learned to do myself, and I would get whatever musical training I got was through the public school systems I went to.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have learned more about what it is to actually be a vocalist by doing these mentorship classes. There's other narrators in these groups who are professional singers as well, and they've always got really good like exercises to follow. I've learned how to do warm-ups and things that go beyond just what I learned in school, and how to better take care of my voice for these long-term, when you're narrating, and also breath control, which I also here's something, maybe this is a better answer for your question earlier about what people probably don't know about me. I'm a trained yoga instructor.
Oh,
I
okay.
did that for a while right up to before having my child, and due to an injury and other things, I just practice for myself now, and I haven't been teaching, but I did learn a lot about breath work and all the physical things that go into how our voice, our vocal health. And so a lot of the breath work that I know comes from my yoga practice, and that has
Mm,
helped a lot with long form narration, like how to breathe while you're reading through these things so you don't constantly run out of air and have to start and stop, and just like little for me, if I am not physically in shape, my voice isn't in shape. So I do a lot of you know, so I'll do some yoga stretches, or I'll do like a little bit of a routine just to kind of get my blood flowing. Um,
mm.
I'll walk a little bit, just trying to keep me like physically active. That helps my breath too, because then I don't feel quite so out of breath as much when I'm in the studio.
Absolutely. Very, very true. And I've gotten a similar answer from a lot of other narrators that I've had on the show, about breath exercises, a little bit of activities in the beginning, to get the blood pumping, blood running, to be energized and energetic. And now, another question, which I think you may have hinted at before, but I'm very curious, Lauren. Would you consider yourself a morning narrator in the sense that you work in the morning? Or are you more of a night owl?
Again, probably both, because those are the times I have. So like now that I'm a mom, so I was always a night person. But now that I'm a mom, like I have to kind of fit my time into, now that she's in school, I do what I can during the day when it's quiet, when I have like time to myself to just sit in the booth. So I've become very much a morning person. Like the second she's out the door, like 8 a.m., I'm in the booth and I'll narrate for several hours. And I usually take it, I slow down in the afternoons. That's when I'll do like my editing or other things. And then a
Mm.
lot of times, not every night, because sometimes I'm just passed out by like 9 o'clock, but some nights I will be in the studio again, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, or even beyond, and I'll do like another hour or two of recording.
Man, oh man. I can never imagine. I've dabbled in a little bit of narration, and this is actually something that a lot of people may not know about me. I dabbled in voice acting and, well, more so of narration than voice acting. When I was reading my books on my own, just to see how it was. It's not easy, as I've learned as an author, that it's not just sitting there and reading it. Reading, it's pacing, it's pretty much everything that we have learned in school and came to, like reading fluency, pausing, breathing, when to, you know, have an inflection, have emotion for certain sentences or lines. It's all of that and more. And this actually now goes into some fun fan questions, Lauren. And the first fan question is, out of all of the projects that you have worked on, do you have a favorite character, scene, or both?
So I think my favorite so far, and I mean, it's hard to pick. It really is, but I think my favorite might be that Christmas one we just released, because the main character in that book is just like snarky, kind of hates everybody. And like I had so much fun playing her. Like she's not she's just sarcastic. So I had to like I wanted to play like a character that was really going through it, but also was kind of disconnected from the fact that she was going through it because she's just like drinking her way through it and like, you know, but also just she has like this quiet anger that comes out all the time and this like biting sarcasm. And it was just a lot of fun to play because
Nice.
yeah, so I really enjoyed that one. It was also just fun. It was the Chains and Candy Canes one I mentioned earlier. It's by Lilith
Mhm.
Abendroth, who I've done a lot of her books, and I'm currently recording another book for her. Um, it's the duets that I do with my one co-narrator, David McLean, and we just have a lot of fun.
Nice. Now,
So,
kind of like a follow-up to that, what was probably the most challenging scene or challenging character to bring to life in any project you've been a part of?
um, I would say I don't know if that's the character. I think I kind of have two answers for this because, like, if I think about what was challenging as a character, um, this is a really dark. So this is a. I'll preface this by saying that this book is incredibly heavy, dark subject matter. So
Mm,
another book by Lilith Abendroth that we did was the second project we did for her. It was called Penance, and
mm,
it is a very dark romance. It's basically a non-con situation. And the character is morally black. He is like not okay, um, and it just deals with like a lot of heavy things. And so I had to play this very kind of meek um, girl who is part of a religious community that's really like oppressive.
mm,
And, you know, she's experiencing something she doesn't understand. She's pregnant and she doesn't know how. So, because I can kind of indicate what's happening in this book.
mhm.
And like, you know, this character that, you know, he was like excommunicated or whatever starts coming back into her life and is sort of like her savior when he's not. And trying to just play that. So, like, there's a lot of subject matter in there that, like, you know, I have certain hard stops and things that I will not narrate,
Right.
and usually non-con falls into that, you know, unless it's used in a certain way, like, you know,
Mm,
and the way she did this, it's actually one of my favorite works of hers, um, but it is really dark and it really does challenge the reader, and so I was trying to also play this character without, like, necessarily traumatizing my audience, you
right.
know, like, I don't wanna be
Mhm.
overly, like, you know, it's like you're
Yes.
playing somebody in distress, but also trying to, like, keep it,
Right.
you know.
And this kind of goes into the next question, which is, authenticity, that you want to make sure that the characters are believable in the world that they are presented in. Much like, from an author's point of view, when we write characters, we want them to be real people, not like caricatures or, figurative representations of events or themes. And then when those characters are brought to life with narration, I think it's even more difficult and more amplified because now you have to develop a voice and make this character seem believable and authentic in the sense of we could possibly see this person in real life, even if they exist, let's say, in a fantasy world. The archetype character that they represent or the characteristics they have are probably real and are maybe based on somebody. So in that regard, Lauren, how did you make sure that every character that you narrated felt genuine and was authentic?
Well, if I'm speaking about that particular character, I think, you know, we all have moments where we feel like we've been, you know, that we like, maybe lost in a situation, not
Mm,
knowing what to do, feeling ignorant, feeling maybe a little betrayed. So you know, I had to think about all that stuff the whole time I was reading this book. I also happen to have a background with it's just like a personal thing. I was raised in a what I consider to be a fundamentalist, oppressive kind of religion. Um, just until a certain age, my mom kind of pulled us out of it. But there's just a lot that you know I can think about when it comes to that. So I think I have some purpose. I had like some personal experience that really
mm.
helped with that particular book. Um, but yeah, so
All right.
I will usually just try to pull on whatever whatever kind of experiences I have, I've been around for a couple of decades. I've got life experience, and like when I read through a book, I just try to think about like, well, what have I been through that, this character could possibly relate to. Um,
Absolutely, very true. And this next question was a two-parter. I definitely feel kind of marries, your background as a singer and self-taught musician, as well as being a narrator. And that is, of course, whenever you become part of a new project, or you and your fellow musicians and bandmates have created a new song, what is the goal that you are making for yourself in that moment? And secondly, what is the promise you are making, not just to yourself, but let's say to your readers and listeners, as well as your guys as fans?
I think for me, every song, and I guess this translates, to every character in every book, it's like that song has its own life. Like, so when I'm writing music with my band partner, we always joke around that, like, somehow this sounds like nothing else we've done, but it still sounds like us. Because everything we do, like the song itself kind of takes on its own life. And we want to honor that rather than try to fit it into the specific sound and genre that we're supposed to be. Because frankly, we don't have one, but like that's part of what we do. So for music, the song kind of dictates what it's going to be about to me. And I just try to really listen to it, and let it kind of go where it's going to go. I like to me, it's less about trying to control it and create an own song is other than like, this song has a certain feel to it. And what does that bring up in me? And then that, informs the next choice I make and what other kind of instrumentation we want to put into it. And then eventually what the lyrics are going to be. For books, when I'm approaching my books, this is already, it's like the song's already written. Somebody already wrote this and they're handing it to me. What is it supposed to sound like now? So I, I always start with I read through it. Whether if it's just like an audition, usually there's like if there's no background, I might ask, but generally, I get a sense that something is happening here. There's a scenario happening here, and this character, what would they be feeling in that scenario, and why would they be feeling it? And for a book, it's a little bit easier because then I can read through the whole book and I know what's going to be happening to this character later on. I get a lot more information about that character. I can have a conversation with the writer to find out, what how they viewed their character. So I'm trying to think, get back to it. Like for me, it's every book I'm going to treat as its own thing. Like I'm not
Mm.
just putting this is my voice and this is what you're going to get. It's like this is my voice and I'm going to use my voice and I sound. You're going to understand. I sound like myself in every book.
Right.
I'm not going to try to sound like somebody I'm not. But the type of experiences that I've experienced in my life, I will pull from different ones for particular books. Like maybe this you know, character that I'm narrating, because I do a lot of first person books. That person might have a very aggressive kind of like or assertive personality, and I will read them a little differently than I would somebody who's going to be very meek.
Mm.
So I start there, and then I kind of just try to respond. It's like, how would I respond in each of these scenes? What would be my response?
Mm.
And thinking about who that character is, like if I would respond shocked, would they respond shocked? Okay, fine. But would they respond shocked and be like, their response would maybe be a little more angry or like, I'm shocked, so I'm going to do something about it? Or would they be like more passive with that? So it's like I try to filter what my response would be through the personality of the character, if that makes
Mm.
sense. Like if I was in that scenario, I'd probably would be like shocked and angry and be in their face. But maybe I'm playing a character that's going to be a little more passive about it, but they're still going to be shocked and they're going to have this inner dialogue going on. So what's that sound like? Um, so I guess when I think about the promise that I'm trying to say, I try to just be as in the moment as possible within the books as I'm narrating them, and to allow, like, my personal experiences to kind of help inform them, but not take over. That's the line
Right.
I try to ride. Like, I don't wanna, like, take over the book because I it's like, it's not about me, I'm just
Mhm.
portraying that character or portraying that particular scene, if it calls for it, and, first person narration, I put a lot more of myself into it, and if I'm just reading, like, more as a narrator, I try to be, then I focus on whether I wanna be there's different styles of narration depending on the type of book. Like, for second or third or excuse me, third person narration, I might be a little more withdrawn, but then I definitely put it into the characters when they have their dialogue.
Absolutely, very true. And this is kind of a little bit more of a personal question, Lauren, but as creatives, and especially with people I've talked on the show, I found this question to be very intriguing in the sense of, there is a hesitancy to let others know of, hey, we're authors or we're voice actors and narrators. There's like a hesitancy to claim ownership that this is who we are, and even a bigger hesitancy to tell people that we have done this. I've had a lot of narrators and authors on the show who have said that they told their friends and family at the beginning of their journey, and they've even told their friends and family when their first book was finished or the first production was out.
Mm.
For you, Lauren, when did you feel comfortable enough to not only claim ownership that you are a narrator, you are a voice actor, and telling friends and family, or did they already know in the beginning?
Um, I remember when that was. Like, I think as soon as I had my first book out, like, I, um, I put it out there. I was like, "Hey, look, I do this now." Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, I don't know if I'm really if there was ever, like, a real time. Like, I don't think yeah, as soon as I got that first book out, I put it out there. And people that already know me, like, they might not have known I was doing that. There's a couple people that knew I was going down that path, but, yeah, that was I didn't for me, it wasn't that I felt, like, uncomfortable telling anybody about it, but maybe it's because, I'm used to being on stage, and as a performer, people expect certain things from me, and this didn't feel like such a major departure. Um
Mm.
For me, it was the types of books that I do because a lot of people might not have expected that, like, yes, I'm doing romance and dark romance, and, like, immediately I'm just like, "Hey, mom, you might not wanna read this one." I'd, like, put it on the I shared my first book on social media. I was like, "Mom, you might not wanna read this one." Like,
Absolutely,
it's
very
dark.
true.
So, you know.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I've had a lot of people kind of share a very similar thing. I think I have one narrator actually very recently said that they worked on this project and it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't, let people know that I've done this, especially if, as I've seen with a lot of narrators, they have different pseudonyms for different genres. And depending on the genre, maybe a little bit too much, either into the angst or spice that a lot of people may not be comfortable with. So there is that, okay, I'm going to tell people I work on this, but not people tell them that I work on this as well. It's all about preferences and, finding your footing and comfortability in an ever-changing industry. And that kind of leads into what I like to call a series of reflective questions, Lauren. And this one, as the starting point, is a very loaded question. So I'll give context for this. So, as I've been doing this show now for about, in total, 5 years, 3 years going on 4 years on YouTube, and actually, no, take that back. 7 years in total, 3 years on Spotify, and now almost 4 years on YouTube. I've realized that a lot of the people that I've had on the show roughly began their careers during the COVID years. That's when technology, as they've stated, really reached its threshold in the sense of technology allowed everyone to stay connected but also create new things. A lot of new authors, new editors, and especially a lot of narrators and voice actors emerged during COVID, during the lockdown period. And social media has been a boon to a lot of creatives. But as I'm sure you'll definitely agree, it's a double-edged sword because social media can help you, but it can also very much destroy you, unfortunately. And I've talked to a lot of people on the show about narrator's block, how social media can heighten that in the sense of trying to play a character but not remember a certain voice, or people are acting like, oh, when are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? Or can you do this? And it's on the spot. It's like, oh, shoot, I don't know what to do. And of course, the dreaded imposter syndrome, because at least for the narrators that I've had on the show, a lot of them have been, more self-taught as opposed to have a background in either, theater, film, or anything like that. And there is that, again, that hesitancy to claim ownership of being a narrator when, 20 years ago or even 30 years ago, a lot of Broadway actors, TV actors, and film actors, narrated books. You still have that now, but you have a lot of independent creatives, on the rise. So I guess ultimately, my question to you is this, Lauren. With all that said, with imposter syndrome, the narrator's block, being a creative in the digital age, and being in a post-COVID digital age, what has still disciplined you to still stay true to yourself as a creative in this ever-changing industry, especially with the rise of generative AI, which has been trickling down into places like ACX and other platforms that narrators use?
Yeah. Yeah, the AI thing is a big question. But before I get to that, I'll back up. So like, hmm. So I'm trying to think of what to tackle first. Imposter syndrome, maybe. Like I've think that because I've already, forgotten my own songs on stage in front of people and things like
Ooh.
that, like that my experiences being a, musician, playing in various bands in front of, audiences and, being on tour and all that, like you forget stuff. Like
Mhm.
my brain will just shut off in the middle of something and it's like it's a song I've sung 800 times and I just can't remember it right now. I've learned to make something up on the spot and pretend like it wasn't happening or to joke my way through it, and generally people don't care and they have a good time, and is the overall performance successful? Like, in narration, I've only, started doing lives not that long ago.
Mm.
My social media, I not a big social media person, so I slowly built up my profiles. And I've only gotten big enough to go live, like, this past couple months, so I do it, and I don't know, it's nice, like, I don't have the audience in front of me, like, you all are out there, you're an abstract at this point, like, I can just focus on what I'm doing in here, and if I screw up on live, I screw up on live, you're seeing what actually happens in my booth, that's part of it.
Absolutely.
So I think I've just gotten over that a long time ago, because believe me, when I first started playing shows and playing on stage, I literally did have to do, like, 3 or 4 shots of bourbon just to get up there. Like, I mean, I went through all that. Like, eventually, I think you just if you do it enough and the world doesn't end, it's not a big deal. Like, for me, I'm more concerned about whether or not I'm doing what I should for that particular book and that particular scene, and if I have to do the same part over and over again, then I do the same part over and over again. Um, I haven't been asked to recall character voices from something that I've done a while back. I mean, I don't know if I would remember it or not. But I think for me, I it doesn't matter if I do. Like, if I did it for the book, if I'm in my studio and I need to recall a character voice from a while back, I have files that I can go and reference that and relearn the voice for the book. So, I mean, if I get put on the spot to remember it out of nowhere and I don't remember it, I'm just, I don't think that that would happen to anybody, you know?
Right.
So I think I've just developed like an I don't care kind of attitude for certain things like that because you're gonna mess up on stage. Like for me, there is no like I guess the perfectionism has been like I've pulled that out of my system because the reality of what it is to be on stage and to be a performer and to be like someone who's a creative is you work with a lot of mistakes, you work with a lot of mess ups, and you're going to have them happen all the time. You learn to improv around them or you course correct. And in the booth, I can stop. That's what pickups are for if I make a mistake. So it's just part of the job to me.
Mm.
And I think that starts to translate in public spaces for me. And I'm probably just not big enough for that to have come back at me. I don't know. I'm not sure how I would deal with, any sort of negative criticism coming from an audience if I'm sure it's going to happen.
Right.
People always have something negative to say. They
That
just
is true,
they just do.
unfortunately.
So I've also learned to kind of just let it go. Like if
Absolutely.
is it something that really is a reflection on me? Like did I do my job well? Did the rights holder or the author of the book, are they happy with what I've done? Is the book selling? Am I getting overall decent reviews? Because, there's going to be that one review that isn't so good and you're going to think about it every day, no matter how many great reviews you have. I still do that too. You just kind of learn to let that stuff slide, like not give it a
Yeah,
lot of weight.
very
So
true.
I think a lot of the comments and stuff that I might get, I'm just, unless I truthfully said something like I shouldn't have said or did something like bad, which I'm trying to try to be very conscientious, so hopefully that won't
Mm.
happen. But if I offend somebody, I'll address it. But there isn't too much that I think I'm going to let myself get hung up on. Otherwise,
Alright.
yeah, you don't. Otherwise, you can't keep doing it. You have to learn how to kind of let that stuff slide.
Very
It's hard.
true.
It's hard, especially when we do
Yeah.
creative stuff because it's so much a reflection of our inner selves in a
Mhm.
lot of ways. So it's hard not to let that stuff get to you.
That is absolutely very, very true. And I think as creatives, we tend to associate our self-worth with a project that we are so very much attached to. But I would say, in my opinion, we shouldn't necessarily attach our self-worth to the project.
Mhm.
Because let's say if a book you've written or a production you've been a part of was not successful, either financially successful or uh, won by popularity or anything of those
Mhm.
lines, it is not a reflection of the people behind the scenes. It's just, unfortunately, the way it is sometimes. It's an industry that is very competitive, it's trying to make money. And I think that's a very important thing to note is that in this industry, whether you're an editor, narrator, or writer, this is not an industry to get rich quick. It is a long grind and very, very tedious, which kind of goes into something which I would like to hear your thoughts on, Lauren, is this notion of narrators can be voice actors, but voice actors cannot be narrated. And I'll break that down a little bit. So, I had a colleague of mine, a fellow narrator, give this reasoning is that voice actors, let's say voice actors who do commercials, they're only trained to do, few lines. They're only trained to do like multiple takes for a few lines of dialogue. That's it. Narrators can do both. They can do short lines, they can do long form fiction or long dialogue. They are trained, they are used to do that. Now, not saying that a voice actor couldn't do it, but it will be a little bit more difficult for them because they're not used to that. And they even went forward and said, like anyone who's ever worked in theater, or even people who are, musicians and singers, they will have an easier time transitioning into narration because they're used to recording lines of dialogue. And I use that word loosely for music because that's like 3 minutes or 5 minutes of just recording a song, probably doing multiple takes, and used to that mental note of just singing or repetition, repetition, repetition. So ultimately, Lauren, going back to the original question, I would like to hear your thoughts on this notion of narrators can be voice actors, but kind of twisting a little bit, voice actors may struggle with being narrators.
Possibly. So I started out with a voiceover class um, by a woman who is a professional voice actor. She's been doing it for 30 some years. She's also a screen actor.
Mm.
Very cool lady. Um, Her name's Jean Zarzor. She was in what's it called? Alto Nights. I think that's what it's called. They changed the name. I think it's called Alto Nights, but it's got she was played a character alongside Robert De Niro, and she was super excited about it. But so she's been doing this for a long time. She knows her stuff. She talks about how narration is different, and that's something she can't do.
Mm.
And I still kind of guess I'm not sure like why that exactly is, but I knew going into voiceover I wanted to do narration. I don't know if it's just the having to stay like you have to maintain a certain energy over a long period of, you know, text. And then you can break it up with those characters and do different character voices. In voiceover, I think you usually just have a couple character voices that you can practice and work for a couple of lines. And then you maybe have a short bit um, and you try different takes on the, on the bit, whether it's like you want to be like maybe high energy and conversational, maybe you're going to be a little bit more authoritative in this take. Depends on what you're selling.
Mm.
So I wonder if like because they focus so much on just I'm just doing this little take and I'm going to do it 3 ways and these are the 3 ways I'm going to do it. When they enter into audiobooks, if it just seems like a very different I don't know. Like I'm not sure because I've only my only experience is working in audiobooks and I through all of the mentorship groups I've been in and everything I've known, there are people that are voice actors or did like radio broadcasting and stuff like
Right.
that wanted to get into doing audiobooks. For them, it was getting out of, I think, that a certain type of voice. Like they have a radio voice and that's all they do. And
Mm.
like maybe there's a nuance that takes a lot of time to develop in audiobooks
Absolutely.
that is different from what is expected in a lot of voiceover in the voiceover industry. But see, to me, I look at them as very different career paths. So I don't like I'm an audiobook narrator. I don't really know. I've got some sense of what it is to be a voiceover artist, but I haven't developed that side of my career so far as to like, I think I don't know how to really answer this question. Like maybe to me, I could, if I was as active in voiceover and had enough like experience working, on commercials and things like that, I might have more insight on that. But
Very true. Absolutely. 'Cause it is a very kind of difficult question to really answer because there is some clear distinction between voice acting and narration. If you let's say you're going to radio, you're only trying to do like small clippets or doing that one take over and over again. For narration, I definitely think I would argue, and I could be completely wrong in this regard, that with narration you have a little more freedom in creativity and like how you want to approach either scene or dialogue for a character, whereas voice acting and narration, or voice acting, sorry, specifically, you are specifically told this is the scene already, the context, this is how the character is acting, this is the voice type, and you're trying to nail that particular emotion and really trying to give that performance, which actually kind of leads then into the business side of being a narrator. And still on this topic, what I found very interesting is what is it? For narrators and for voice actors specifically, when working on a project, there is this understanding that, I want to showcase who I am. I want to show the reader and the author what I'm capable of, doing all of these auditions, which they don't talk about a lot for voice actors and for narrators working on audiobooks. There's a lot of auditions they guys have to go through to make sure that, you are chosen. Your voice is the right voice for either the narrator or for one of the characters. And when doing that and working on the project, then comes the next issue of balancing what I like to call the teeter-totter, where you want to showcase your individuality as a narrator and voice actor, but you also have to understand that for certain genres, there are expectations of how the story is supposed to go in terms of how it's presented. If we're looking at, let's say, dark romance, there's a specific voice that a lot of readers and authors expect for the characters and for the overall setting. Fantasy, romantasy, historical fiction, thriller, all have the same mentality. And it is this balancing act of not trying to be like another narrator and kind of copying their style or approach, but not being too out there on left field to where it's going to confuse the reader and the author. So for you, Lauren, going back to your project, let's say the Christmas project that you were involved in, how did you really balance the two of knowing the genre that you were getting into, but also showcasing and highlighting what makes you stand out as a narrator and voice actor?
So I actually think that for that particular book, I was the most comfortable in it, mainly because I kind of have a snarky attitude anyway. So like I was able to be mostly myself. But I also there's like a horror kind of element to that particular
Mm,
book. It's got like a slasher horror kind of thing going on, and um like very lightly. It's mostly, a monster romance, but it's also just absurd. Like there's like so I kind of played it more straightforward, and we let the characters be the characters. And the nice thing about when you're doing a duet, I think there's more like a bigger threshold for allowing you can be a little bit more like, out there with some of the voices. Like we actually employed some effects on that one very lightly because, it wasn't an immersive audio or anything. And I didn't want them to be like, you don't want that to stand out. But we added a little bit of deepening to like the MMC's voice when he
mm,
becomes in his monster form, like his voice gets really inhuman. So we played around with that. There's this evil elf on a shelf character that we used my voice and this like I did this maniacal like character voice for it and then dropped the pitch like a ton and added like a little bit of a chorus effect to make him sound mechanical. Um so because that particular book, those things wouldn't have, that wouldn't have worked on any other book I've done so far
mm,
because, there's a little bit of play, I think, there in that kind of genre when you have like that kind of, you have monsters and other things involved and it's a duet. So there's some difference. It's not just my voice the whole time. So that allowed us to play with that a little bit for that particular book. So
mm.
that gave me, I think, a little bit more room to be maybe a little more intense in some of my narration than I would have played in like a different book.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this actually is a very, very special fan question, Lauren, that I actually got from one of my commenters and reviewers, because it is something that I've noticed a lot speaking with a lot of my friends in the narration world. And I'm wondering if you've seen this on your own personal feed. And it is the notion of, with going back to AI, where
Oh yeah.
there was
Yeah.
actually a really good quote that someone sent to me. I'm actually going to try to find it because I think it is the most accurate uh, statement of AI, where it is, if I can just find it, and I didn't, unfortunately, but it pretty much said that AI steals creativity for the wealthy so that those who are creative can never obtain wealth. And looking at that, I was like, that is the truest statement for AI I have ever heard. And going back to what my friend originally said, of this notion of with AI kind of getting a little bit out of control, a lot of voice actors and narrators have begun copywriting their voice to protect themselves, which for people who may not know, especially for those who love audiobooks, ACX, and this has been said numerous times on my show for a lot of narrators, viewers. So this isn't like just, breaking news, it should be of ACX and a lot of other companies trying to take narrator voices and use it for their productions without the consent of the narrator, which leads to a lot of narrators and fellow creatives copywriting their voice. So ultimately, Lauren, I would like to hear your thoughts on more of AI and just how it's gotten a little bit out of control in like the world, and how it's kind of, as the quote said, it is taking a lot from creativity and making it impossible for creatives to grow and have a leg to stand on.
Yeah, this reminds me, you did ask me something about AI earlier, and I forgot to go into it. Gosh, I have a lot of thoughts on AI. I feel like I could talk about this for a long time, so I'm gonna try to make it concise. And you would point out, like, that's one thing I haven't thought to do is copyright my own voice. I use an AI writer on all my contracts, and I just generally decline any sort of AI. I don't use it. I try not to use it in anything as much as I possibly can, because I find there are potential uses that could be considered ethical and, an advancement for AI, not necessarily generative AI as far as I understand
Yes,
it. So
100%.
I don't want to just be like, all AI out the window, because I do think it's done some things that you know, I could see being, good. But generally speaking, I have seen it employed unethically in a lot of spheres. Like, I hate seeing it. Like, it's like I know narrators that are all like anti-AI, but they use like AI imagery. It's like there's like we use it a lot. I think it's very pervasive, and
Mhm.
I think it's unethical. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's that it is, I think, a way for, I talk about big tech, big tech, I think, is something that we can all agree with is real now. Like, it's not anti-technology or anti-advancement to view them as being predatory and trying to basically create. It's like the disruptor market on steroids, where, like, AI is now taking out all of the tech jobs that, like coding and things like that everyone went into. It's wiping out like a generation's, like the millennials and like Generation Z. Like, we were all taught to go into coding and become like, out, all these tech jobs, computer science, all this stuff that now is like being completely taken out by AI. And then there's the generative stuff. They want to go into the creative market. It feels like it's just a way to um, control and streamline all of these different markets, so the tech companies can have like some kind of control over it to gain whatever assets they want to gain from that. It's cornering markets. Um, so that's just the economic implications on that, like what it does to our voice. Like, do we even own our own images or our own, like, what do we have to copyright? Like,
Mhm.
it didn't occur to me that I should copyright my own voice. Like, why would
Yeah.
I have to do that? But you're right. I mean, that's smart that, like, there's a lot of narrators doing this. That's very true. We should probably be doing that. I should probably be copyrighting my own face. I don't know. Like, at what point can we protect ourselves? And at what point is, like, I think as a society, and I see this happening, there's a coalition, I think, I can't think of the actor's name right now. I know there's a large coalition being formed by a lot of celebrities and creatives throughout the states, and I think it's international at this point.
Mhm.
That's trying to fight against the use of generative AI and how to like, they're speaking in like, with the UN and all these, in those other, government spaces about like the dangers of what generative AI is doing just to like for our economy. I mean, what's that going to do if you take all these jobs away and automate them? This is like, it's automation. And,
Hmm.
I think I come from like rural areas. We've seen automation take out a lot of jobs before it became AI and before it, it's like a similar thing to me.
Right.
So I've always been like, really, I try not to use it as much as possible. And I've always tried to speak out against it. I don't know what to say about it other than like, I think we just need to keep resisting it as much as possible. Like I caution people against using it too freely because that's how it gains traction. The more we make memes of ourselves or use like, OpenAI to ask it questions for something that we don't know how to answer. Like,
Right.
I don't think we should be doing that. I don't think we needed to do that.
Absolutely. Very true. And I definitely, from an author's point of view, I think why a lot of authors that I have seen are using uh, AI narration is because on one side I can see the argument that it is cheaper because hiring a full-on narrator, especially if you're an indie author, it's not cheap. It's not easy. And I can completely understand that regard. However, I have also been a big proponent of using narrators for snippet reads because that's, in my opinion, gained more traction and attention to books than in some cases, full on AI narrated content. And I've worked with a lot of great narrators, some of whom have been on the show a few times: Daphne Winters, Damien Knight,
I know
Sammy
them.
Rowe.
Yeah,
Who
they're
else?
wonderful people.
Yes. Amber M, Heather, Lauren, Brittany, Kyle, uh, and so many incredible Mariana, and of course Luke, and so many more people have been so incredible to work with. And I urge everybody who's an author or creative to work with narrators, even if you cannot have them for a full-on production. Snippet reads are perfect because they love working on snippet reads and everything.
And a lot of times
And
we'll just do that. Yeah. We'll just
yeah,
do it for you.
100%, absolutely. And I love just sending them lines of dialogue, which has been so amazing, so cool. And as
One
we actually near the end of this amazing and incredible interview, Lauren, there was one final question I did want to ask you. And that is, of course, we talked about a lot of things, a lot of very important things in this interview, which I really do appreciate and really enjoy. And I think a lot of my viewers are definitely going to take a lot of information from this. At the end of the day, when people hear your voice or they see your name attached to a project, what do you hope they will take away from either your performance or from how you approach a project? Or no, actually, I'll backtrack to what I said. What do you ultimately want them to take away from your performance of the projects that you are a part of?
So that's a tricky one. It's like I want them to really fall into the story and forget that I exist, basically. It's like I'm there to be a conduit in a lot of ways for what the experience of listening to this story. It's like if you're reading a book, I think you hear different voices in your head for each of the
Mhm.
characters or have like a sense of what their personalities are like. It's like because you get lost in that story. And if it's a good story, that's going to pull you in that way. And you're going to imagine what's going on, in the world that you're in. You're going to see it, you're going to hear the sounds, it becomes up here. And I think for a lot of us in audiobook land, we want to kind of create that for the listener.
Mm.
So my hope is that I am portraying the characters in a way that I'm not getting in the way of them so that I can allow that for the listener. So that they're getting sucked into the story. They can visualize it. They can hear it. They're not going to be distracted by my voice or something I'm doing and have it take them out of the experience. I want to make sure that I maintain being that conduit. That's, I think, my first and foremost. Like that's what I try to focus on and what I hope that people get from it.
Beautifully said, Lauren. Beautifully said. And on that note, viewers and listeners, we end this incredible and very thought provoking narrator interview on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Want to give a huge thank you to Lauren for coming on the show and making your official debut. Now, Lauren, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect? And where can people check out the projects that you have mentioned earlier in the interview, as well as do you have any upcoming projects you would like to share and announce?
Of course. Well, I am on both um, TikTok and Instagram. Those are my social media platforms. Both of those, my handle is at Lauren Hilary _VO. Or you can just look up Lauren Hilary IG or TikTok. I'm on Audible. All my titles are basically on Audible at this point. So if you search Lauren Hilary, I will say it's Hillary with one R because I do spell it, I guess, a little differently. It's LAURENHILARY, Lauren Hilary. You'll find me on there. My website's also www.laurenhilaryvo.com. I should be pretty easy to find. And I am currently working on, so the first duet I did with David McLean was Like a Moth to a Flame, which is probably our most successful book by Lilith Abendroth. And we are currently recording the sequel to that, Incinerate. And so that's super exciting. And I do have a couple other projects that I'm in the works I'm super excited about, but I can't really talk about them yet. So I'll just hint at that.
Awesome.
And one more thing I wanted to say real quick, if you are an author and you are really interested in having narration done for your book and you feel like you have to do it and you're tempted by using AI, there are other avenues, and royalty share is becoming a more common and possible model. I occasionally will do royalty share for certain books, and I've actually been able to do some duets on a royalty share model. And while I am still exploring this myself, I do know other narrators and there are other companies that find ways of doing royalty share that isn't dependent on just ACX or using Audible, the Amazon system. There's ways of going wide with that. I'm hoping, I want to be able to do that and offer that myself soon. But there are other options. And, always reach out. You never know what we can do for you.
Absolutely. Beautifully said, Lauren. And again, if you want to reach out to Lauren directly, all of her socials will be down below in the description of this video. And if you'd love to see Lauren back on the show in a follow-up interview or be another narrator featured in the Writers Hub series, you know what you have to do, viewers and listeners. Like this video, comment down below, and subscribe. And also, as a final announcement, if I have not told you all, I'm going to be at this year's Festival of Books in LA on April 18th at booth 128 for 2 hours, roughly, actually not 2 hours, sorry, about 4.5 hours, 5 hours, give or take, from 10 to 12:30 and 3 to 5:30. Remember, booth 128, that is where I will be featured with all of my books, and I look forward to seeing you all there. And until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. We'll see you all in the next episode. A wonderful day, everybody.